All right, well, check it out. We are here. Thanks for coming back. We're going to talk about Hypervisor. So let's dig in right away. So instead of giving you any more hints, I'll tell you that a hypervisor is a function that abstracts, which means isolates, operating systems, the OS, and applications from any underlying computer hardware. So this abstraction enables the underlying host machine hardware to independently operate one or more virtual machines as guests, enabling multiple guest VMs to effectively share the system's physical compute resources, such as processor cycles, memory space, and network bandwidth. So a hypervisor would be used by someone who wants to consolidate space on a server, or even run multiple isolated applications on a single server. Hypervisors are commonly supported in virtualization software such as vCenter Server. All right, so these hypervisors are traditionally implemented as a software layer, such as VMware, vSphere, or Microsoft Hyper-V. But hypervisors can also be implemented as code embedded into a system's firmware. Now, there are two principal types of hypervisor, and they are cleverly named Type 1 and Type 2 hypervisor. We'll talk about Type 1 first. Type 1 hypervisors are deployed directly atop the system's hardware without any underlying OSs or any other software. Now, these are the ones that are called bare metal hypervisors. They are the most common and most popular type of hypervisor for the enterprise data center. Some examples would include vSphere and Hyper-V. The Type 2 hypervisors run as a software layer atop a host OS and are usually called hosted hypervisors, such as VMware Workstation Player or Parallels Desktop, if you're familiar. Now, hosted hypervisors are often found on endpoints, such as personal computers. So what do you suppose these are used for? Hypervisors are important to any system administrator or system operator because virtualization adds a crucial layer of management and control over the data center and enterprise environment. See, staff members not only need to understand how the respective hypervisor works, but also how to perform related management tasks such as VM configuration, migration, and snapshots. So the role of a hypervisor is also expanding. Storage hypervisors, for example, are used to virtualize all the storage resources in the environment to create centralized storage pools that admins can then provision without having to concern themselves with where the heck the storage is physically located. See, today, storage hypervisors are a key element of software-defined storage. Networks are also being virtualized with hypervisors, enabling networks and network devices to be created, changed, managed, and destroyed entirely through software without ever touching physical network devices. And as with storage, network virtualization is appearing in broader software-defined network or software-defined data center platforms. All right, so you want to take a walk down memory lane with me? Answer's yes. Let's go back to the early to mid-1960s, 1970s. This is when the earliest forms of hypervisors started to appear because that's when they were first created. It's actually in 1966 that IBM released its first production computer system, the IBM System 360-67, which was capable of full virtualization. See, IBM also began production of its CP40 system in 1967, and this system ran off a modified S360-40 system, and that provided virtualization capabilities. See, this system also enabled multiple user applications to be run concurrently, which actually was not possible before. The control program, Cambridge Monitor System by IBM, was released in 1968 and lasted throughout the 1970s. And in 1970, IBM released System 370, and this would add support for virtual memory 2 years later in 1972. Since then, virtualization has been a feature in all systems. But it was around this time more community members began using open source projects to further develop virtual systems with hypervisors. So then IBM introduced the Processor Resource System Manager Hypervisor, which could manage logical partitions, in 1985. Now, it wasn't until the mid-2000s that more OSs such as Linux, Unix, Windows all began supporting hypervisors, and around this time, hypervisors began premiering with better hardware, cost, and consolidation abilities. And then in 2005, vendors began supporting virtualization of x86 products. Now, as long as you haven't had your audio muted or anything, you've heard us talk about hypervisors providing benefits to the enterprise data center. And we're not kidding. See, because first, the ability of a physical host system to run multiple guest VMs can vastly improve the utilization of the underlying hardware, whereas physical or non-virtualized servers might only host one OS in a single application. A hypervisor virtualizes the server, enabling the system to host multiple VM instances, each running an independent OS and application on the same physical system, using far more of the system's available compute resources. Sorry, I get excited about this stuff. Why am I apologizing? You're excited too, aren't you? VMs are also very mobile. So the abstraction that takes place in a hypervisor also makes the VM independent of the underlying hardware. Traditional software can be tightly coupled to the underlying server hardware, meaning moving the application to another server requires time-consuming and error-prone reinstallation and reconfiguration of the application. And by comparison, a hypervisor makes the underlying hardware details irrelevant to the VMs. So this enables VMs to be moved or migrated between any local or remote virtualized servers, with enough computing resources available, of course, almost at will, with effectively zero disruption to the VM. That's why this is a feature that's termed live migration. Okay, so VMs are also logically isolated from each other, even though they run on the same physical machine. So in effect, a VM has no native knowledge or dependence on any other VM. An error, crash, or malware attack on one VM doesn't proliferate to other VMs on the same or other machines. This makes hypervisor technology extremely secure. So finally, snapshots make it possible to instantly revert a VM to a previous state. Although snapshots, or checkpoints, as Microsoft calls them, aren't intended to be used as a substitute for backups, snapshots can act as a protective mechanism, especially when performing maintenance on a VM. If an admin is about to upgrade a VM's OS, they can take a snapshot prior to performing the upgrade. If the upgrade fails, then the admin can restore the snapshot to instantly restore the VM to its previous state. So let's summarize some of these key benefits of hypervisors. Reduce costs through better hardware utilization. The ability to quickly and easily migrate a running VM to a different host without taking the VM offline. A bare metal hypervisor provides hardware isolation for VMs. An attacker can't use a compromised VM to attack an adjacent VM, at least not by using the hypervisor. Bare metal hypervisors generally include a snapshot feature that enables VMs to instantly be restored to a prior state without the need for restoring from a backup. All right, so I'm glad we've got that. Let's move on. We've got containers, right? They might seem like hypervisors, but hypervisors host kernel-based VMs designed to create an environment that mimics a collection of physical machines. See, each VM contains its own independent OS. So, in contrast, containers can share an OS kernel. known as a base image. So each container runs a separate application or microservice, but depends on the underlying base image. Okay? So Microsoft actually offers two different container options. It's possible to build a traditional container architecture on top of Windows Server, but there is also an option to create a Hyper-V container deployment that acts as a hybrid environment. So it's going to use a VM as the basis for the container infrastructure. You follow? Kubernetes has become the standard tool for managing Linux containers across private, public, and hybrid cloud environments. Kubernetes is an open-source system created by Google, originally launched in 2015. And Kubernetes can actually automate the scheduling, deployment, scaling, and maintenance of containers across cluster nodes. Now, hypervisor security processes include ensuring the hypervisor is secure throughout its lifecycle, including during development and implementation. If an attacker gains unauthorized access to the hypervisor, management software, or the software that orchestrates the virtual environment, then that attacker could potentially gain access to any and all the data stored on each VM. Other possible vulnerabilities include shared hardware caches, the network, and potential access to the physical server. So here's a few of the common security practices for hypervisors. Limiting the users in a local system. Limiting attack services by running hypervisors on a dedicated host that doesn't perform any additional roles. Keeping systems updated by adhering to patch management best practices. Configuring the host to act as part of a guarded fabric. Enabling VM encryption to prevent rogue admins from gaining access to VMs. Encrypting the storage on which the VMs reside by using BitLocker or another similar encryption option. Using role-based access control, RBAC, and this will limit administrative privileges. Use a dedicated physical network adapter for management traffic. Use a dedicated physical network adapter for VM migration traffic. Use a dedicated physical network adapter for cluster traffic. So you're probably aware by now that there are several major hypervisors available today, ranging from free platforms to pricey enterprise-grade products. And these are a few of the most widely used hypervisors. Citrix Hypervisor, Linux KVM, kernel-based VMs, Nutanix AHV, Acropolis Hypervisor, Microsoft Hyper-V, Oracle VM Server, Oracle VM VirtualBox, VMware ESXi. And guess what, my friends? We got to wrap it up. Now you know all about Hypervisor. Well done, and guess what? I look forward to seeing you in the next video.